Newest topic is topic 6, and it's all about populations, communities, and ecosystems. And it really kind of comes down to this big question of how do living and non living things really affect one another? And so the first dive into this is let's look within an ecosystem at how different organisms can interact. And I really want to answer the questions of how can resource availability affect interactions between organisms? And how is population size affected by predation and symbiotic relations? And then lastly, how are patterns of interactions between organisms similar in different ecosystems? So that's really what this lesson is all going to be focused on. And there's a lot of academic language and vocabulary in here, and so you might want to take some time to really read through the chapter and maybe even read the definitions of these words, but I'll be talking about them quite a bit as well. So just as a review, a habitat is all of the biotic and abiotic factors in an area wherever that organism lives. So here you're looking at a picture of a lion's habitat. It's a massive area, but the key here is remembering that it includes all abiotic factors as well. Now the first concept I want to talk about is ecological niche. Now in front of me, you can see the definition, but really it includes how an organism obtains its food, the type of food an organism eats, and what other organisms eat it. And a lot of this has to do with the energy role of the organism within an ecosystem, because that has to do with how it obtains its food, and adaptation as well. So let's talk about competition first. So competition, or competitive exclusion, this is when there's two organisms or two species, but they're going for the same resource. And one of these species is going to be have adapted better to the niche, or to be able to get that food. And the other one will be not as adapted, and it will become extinct. And adaptation is that change from generation to generation to become better suited to get food. Now, invasive species may easily outcompete organisms that are native to a particular region. And I think a classic example of it is the native birds of Hawaii. The iwi and the apapane are being outcompeted by all sorts of birds at this point that came in as invasive species. And you can also see that with all sorts of vines, invasive vines, and different bacteria, and a lot of our native plants, which have not really had to adapt because there was nothing really hurting them for a long, long time. They have to now adapt to meet those needs because they're competing with invasive species. So predation, predation is the next concept I want to talk about. And you can see within predation is the word predator. This is where one species hunts, captures, and feeds another. So heterotrophs can prey on autotrophs and other heterotrophs, and it goes on and on and on. So this interaction is where an organism is killing another one for food. It is a predator. The other one is a prey. A great example is a tiger shark. A tiger shark will prey on all sorts of different animals, including a sea turtle. And when that happens, the tiger shark would be the predator and the sea turtle would be the prey. Now, the tiger shark has adapted over the years to become a better predator. In fact, it has adaptations such as sharp teeth, its hydrodynamic body, so it can flow through the water faster, and then in addition to that, it also has a dark top and a lighter bottom, so that if you're above it and you're looking down on it, you can't really see it. And if you're below it and you're looking up on it, same thing, it kind of just blends in. So it's almost a form of camouflage at the same time. And predation can have an effect on population size, or more importantly, the number of a specific prey or a different organism. So here you're going to see a predator and prey cycle. And so here, when the prey outnumbers the predators, it always outnumbers the predators. And when it doesn't, then the predators are in trouble. But you'll notice that there's kind of a response. As the prey increases, the number of predators also increases because there's more food. But then when the number of prey decrease, the number of predators decrease. And it goes through this kind of um, almost like a dance or call and response again and again and again. Symbiosis or symbiotic relationships is an interesting one. And there's three different really kind of types that we're going to talk about. And they are mutualism, commensalism, and parasitism. So it's the relationship between two or more organisms. And this relationship, just like in human relationships, differs. So let's start with mutualism. So when there's two species that depend on each other, this is mutualism. So a classic example of mutualism is when you have the oxpecker bird and a zebra. The oxpecker rides on the back of the zebra. The zebra gets all of the bugs picked off of its back, and in the meantime, the oxpecker gets a free meal. Here you can see a couple different pictures. The bee is going to gather the nectar from the pollen from the plant, and in the meantime, it will also pollinate the other plants. And so they both have a mutual benefit. It benefits both species. It's mutual in its benefit. Commensalism is an interesting one, though. Commensalism is when you have one species being benefited, but the other one isn't really helped, but it's also not really harmed. And ecologists actually believe that commensalism is very rare. Most of the time, what people consider commensalism is actually an example of mutualism or parasitism, which we'll talk about in a second. But I think that there's one clear example of commensalism, and that is a bird making a nest in a tree. The tree doesn't get any benefit from a bird making a nest in the tree, and the bird isn't hurting the tree in any way. But the bird does get the benefit of having its nest off of the ground and being able to protect its young. So that's one clear example of commensalism. And then that brings us to parasitism. So parasitism is quite possibly the most disgusting version of all of these different relationships. Fleas, tapeworms, we've talked about lots of different kinds of parasites. It's a relationship that involves one organism living with, on, or inside another organism, and it harms it at the same time. And we refer to these things as parasites. And they have really, really complex lifestyles that can often involve more than one host. And so the first, this is a life cycle of the tsetse fly, and it's a particularly disgusting life cycle that you can see goes through humans and then comes back out of humans as well. And it just circulates in its entire life, and it's really disgusting. And then here is a tapeworm. And the tapeworm have different stages. The first would be in the infective stage. One of the things that can happen is that these cows or cattle can become infected by eating vegetation that has the eggs or the gravid proglottids of a tapeworm. And at that point, the eggs will actually penetrate in the intestinal wall, and they'll make their way around to the different musculature, which we refer to as meat on a cow or a pig. And then at that point, it develops more, and then we eat that meat. And if you eat undercooked pig or cow that has been infected with the parasite, tapeworm parasite, you can also then at this point begin to have these same parasites, tapeworms living within you, specifically in your small intestines, and then it can just continue and continue. So yeah, it's a really kind of gnarly version of symbiosis. But it is still symbiotic. Symbiotic doesn't always have to be beautiful, like in mutualism. Sometimes it can be kind of gross, just like that's kind of how it rolls in nature. And so, just to recap today, we covered a couple different concepts. The last thing I want to talk about is adaptation and survival. It's all about survival. Remember, the purpose of life is to reproduce, but also to survive. And organisms will change different characteristics over generations. They will, certain characteristics of an organism will be favored with new generations, while others will go away. And I think the nene goose is a perfect example of how you can see it evolving over time. It adapted. The nene goose flew here. We have lava rock, and so its webbed feet became clawed so it could hold onto the lava rock. Well, that didn't happen overnight. That has slowly happened. In fact, if we were to come back another 10,000 years from now, we might even see a different foot altogether on the nene goose. So this is the concepts for the next couple of days. Is all about interactions and ecosystems. And so the next thing you should do is dive into the reading. It's on page 294. Please make sure that you also read all of the other additional readings and complete all the notebook entries. And we're going to talk more about this soon. Okay, thanks.